Let's plant an avocado tree. I'm planting my avocado trees in 25-gallon containers because I have a small backyard, and this will allow me to contain their size and also keep them nice and happy because our soil here is not what they usually like. They prefer well-draining sandy loamy soil. Here we have hard clay soil that does not drain very well at all, so I think they'll be very happy in containers. Yesterday I transplanted this beautiful Mexicola Grande, and I think I'm gonna add one more stake to try and keep it more upright because their trunks are so frail. I really don't like having the stake supporting the entire trunk because I feel like the tree never really gets enough strength to stand up on its own, and this is a good example. So I'm trying to get it used to not having to rely on a stake to stand up straight. Here's what the pot looks like. I'm placing them right here because they won't be hit with direct southern sun exposure, but they will get morning sun, a little bit of afternoon shade, and right before the sun goes down, they're gonna get a little bit more sun. I think that's gonna keep them very happy. For a lot of other places that might not be enough sun, but here where I live, Arizona sun is on a whole other level where it gets scorching hot, and I want these trees to have a nice microclimate. The good thing about them being in containers is if I ever feel like they're not getting enough sunlight, I can always move them around. They do become very heavy, so it's kind of tedious to do that, but it's always an option. And in the past year, I've moved several trees around to find their perfect spot. So let's get started. I already have my potting mix in the wheelbarrow. I'm gonna add a bag of mushroom compost, and I'm also going to add a 50-pound bag of all-purpose sand. When it comes to avocados, they don't want their feet wet for very long, so I want to make sure that it's really well draining, and I'll probably have to water it a little bit more often, but that's fine. I want the water to be able to drain through easily. Let's start off with some compost. Let's start mixing this up. Sometimes it's easier just to buy the bag of potting mix and then amend it. I have the ingredients to be able to mix up soil, so that's why I'm doing it this way. But that's also a good option. You just want to make sure that it's really well draining. Truthfully, whenever I'm mixing large portions of soil, I think it's a lot easier whenever I mix them up on top of the tarp because the wheelbarrow gets so full that it's easy to make a mess. And with the tarp, it's a lot easier to clean up, and it's also easier to mix. 3,000 years later, it's finally ready to go. So I'm gonna start filling up my pot, and then we'll move on to the next part. This is my fuerte avocado. And this is the pot. Before I fill up the pots, I always make sure that the drainage holes are nice and open because sometimes there might be little things like this still stuck on there. So I want to make sure that the drainage holes are there. I don't add any more drainage holes, but you definitely can if you feel like you need them. I'm going to stop here so I can add some worm castings and mycorrhizae. So first, let's start off with the worm castings. I add a healthy amount in there, and then I'm going to take out my tree. But before I do that, I'm going to remove the stake. Okay, this one is standing up a bit more than my Mexicola, but whenever they tied it to the stake, they left this branch sort of flopped over to the opposite side. So it's kind of crossing. Oh no. Great. Yep. This is why I say that sometimes nurseries stake them in a rush, because this branch was literally twisted over to the opposite side, and when I tried to move it back to where it's supposed to go, it snapped. So that sucks. There's another branch starting to grow out from here, so hopefully that can take its place. But let's take a look at these roots. I like to press down on the sides to sort of loosen it from the pot. And then I can take it out. So the first thing I'm going to do is add mycorrhizae to my pot. This is a step that I never skip when it comes to planting trees, even those with vigorous roots, because it does help them establish better. That mycorrhizae, they just absolutely adore. As you can see, it's planted several inches above the height of the pot, but that's fine with me. That's actually what I want. And then I'm going to create more of a dome shape over here. But first I'm going to sprinkle the sides of the roots with some mycorrhizae. And then I'm gonna add a bit more worm castings. And now I'm going to backfill. As you can see, it's still planted above grade level. I can see the root flare right here. And over the next few years, as the soil settles, it'll definitely go down, but the tree won't be buried too deep. The last thing I'm gonna do is mulch. I'm going to be using some shredded straw. I also have some clippings that I'll add later on so that they can break down over time. The thing with using straw is that it easily breaks down. Wood takes a little bit longer, but that's fine because I'm going to be replacing it with clippings from the front yard over the next few months. And here's my shredded straw. This will help to insulate the soil so that it doesn't dry out too fast, and it'll also insulate those roots. Normally I reserve this for my garden beds, but it also works for trees. It just breaks down a lot faster. I'm also going to add support to this tree because as you can see, it can barely stand up on its own. Ooh, and I don't want that to snap. So I'm gonna add one stake over here at an angle, and another over here at an angle as well. And then I'll use some garden tape to hold it in place. I might need to add a few more just because these branches have no strength whatsoever. So here's what the tree looks like right now. Even though it's putting on new growth, even though it looks really happy, it's not very strong at all because of that stake that was holding it in place. Unless under special circumstances, I never leave the stake right up against the tree because that's what'll happen. It'll take way longer for the tree to become stronger because it's so used to being held in place that whenever there's strong winds, it doesn't really move anywhere. So that trunk takes longer to really thicken up and become strong and sturdy. Rarely do I ever leave a stake. You can see some of my citrus trees behind me happen to have one, but that's only because they're still in recovery from being uppotted and having their roots heavily disturbed and some of them cut away. But for new plantings, I really want that trunk to get nice and strong. And if I leave the stake right here, that's not really going to happen as quickly as I would like. It'll take a lot longer because the tree is going to be babied. And the only reason that trunk will be straight is because it's being forced into that position versus allowing it to move freely back and forth whenever there's a wind. I think that'll help strengthen it a lot faster. So this is what the tree looks like right now. The last thing I'm going to do is water it in. And that's basically it. This little puerta avocado is ready to go and I can't wait to see it flourish in the next year.